Now I'm not going to have you believe for 1 minute that I know much about NASCAR. From what I do know though, it does have a popular following stateside, and the rest of the world doesn't seem to get what appears to be a large number of cars driving in circles for laps on end, with the odd pile-up thrown into the mix. But that's not to say I don't think it would make a good racing game. Sure, the N64 has plenty of arcade races, but as far as simulation racing goes, it's really mostly down to the Formula 1 games for those of us who do like things a little bit more serious. NASCAR 99 was a 1998 release which contains 18 real-life tracks and 31 official NASCAR drivers. To add to this, there's also 6 NASCAR legends, and so the total number of drivers is huge. The only downside is that when playing the game there's only 19 cars on the track, which is a few less than the PlayStation version. That's not where the good points end though. The game has play-by-play commentary when racing, 2-player support, lots of tweaks so you can make your car how you like it, and also preset steering wheel support which many N64 racers fail to include. It's when you get into the game though that things start to go wrong. The game really can't decide if it wants to be an arcade game or a simulation one. There's not quite enough depth in the controls and adjustments to your car to live up to its simulation promises, which leaves much of the racing action to a pure arcade racing feel. Now if you picked up this title as a NASCAR fan, then I can't help but think you'd have been a little bit disappointed. The tracks are all true to life and the drifting effect in the game does the job well enough. It's just that when racing, everything becomes a little bland and lacks any real excitement. The car handling is so basic and forgiving, which makes this very accessible for people like me who are just casually interested. But for serious simulation racing fans, it boils down to little more than holding the acceleration button, with the occasional tap on the brakes to keep you on the racing line. Thankfully though, you can make the game more satisfying to play. Surprisingly, the arcade settings are turned on by default, and so just head into the options and turn these off and you'll have a game which gives you more control over how you race, and it does give a more realistic sense to it. The game does neither mode perfectly though. Some of the crashes look downright cartoonish, and the pit mode is laughably poor. The cars do take some real-time damage, which is a nice touch, but trying to throw your car around corners with any real sense of speed is difficult. The controls also don't help at times, and it does feel like you're trying to steer a tank, and then suddenly you'll feel like you're handling a motorbike travelling at 200 miles per hour. There's just not enough balance, and it does make the game feel like a chore to play. The graphics also let the game down, and from the moment I booted it up I entered a race and it just looked like I was playing a poorly ported PlayStation version of the game. The cars look blocky and ugly, and the effects are also heavily pixelated, which does give the visuals a very grainy and unrefined finish to them. There is also a huge ton of pop-up and fade-in, which can make it hard to master the tracks unless you're already familiar with them. There will be times when turns will appear out of nowhere, and by which time you'll have no time to react given the game's sloppy controls. On a plus point though, there's next to no slowdown, and even with 18 other cars on the track, all seemingly racing with no predetermined race paths, which does make overtaking interesting. Add to this a whole host of different views, including a very solid cockpit view, and things are not as bad as they first seem. In fact, a nice touch was that the audio also changes depending on your view. Choose to follow your car from the rear and you'll hear much of the race environment, but if you switch to an internal cockpit view, and the effects are amplified, which does give a great sense of racing. As the game was quickly and very poorly ported, the digitized audio is horrible, and the lack of storage space on the N64 cart leaves you hearing the same lines of commentary almost every race you have. So do yourself a favour and go into the options menu and turn off the commentary after a few races. You'll be doing yourself a favour. Ultimately though, I'm not really the target gamer that the developers were trying to attract with this game, but I also suspect that NASCAR fans would have avoided it too, as it teeters on trying to please them but also appeal to the mass market at the same time. If you want to play this game, then stick with the PlayStation 1 version. It has more racers on the track and better audio. It makes sense to play that version than this poorly ported and confused racer. And so for today's topic of conversation, I want to know what you think the best simulation racing game of this era was. It doesn't have to be on the N64, so if you prefer Gran Turismo to World Driver Championship, let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. And until next time.